Let's talk today about functions and one-to-one functions in particular. So first, a review about what a function is. It's a relation between the variables in which each input has exactly one output. Each input has exactly one output. Okay, so let's say that in this relation between these two columns of numbers, this is the input. We usually call that X. You don't have to, but it's just kind of the convention that we use X. And then for the output, we use Y. Okay, so when we put in 0 into the function or into the relation, we get 0. When we put in 1 into the relation, we get 1. When we put in 2 into the relation, we get 4. When we put 3 into the relation, we get 9. And this is supposed to be a negative here, okay? So when we put in -3, we also get 9, okay? So notice though that each of the inputs has one unique output. When we put in 3, we always get 9. When we put in -3, we always get 9. We don't sometimes get -9, right? So this is defined as a function. Over here, this is our input and this is our output. And when we put in 0, we get 0. When we put in 1, we get 1. And when we put in 1, again though, this time we get -1. When we put in 2, we get 4 or -4. So there's two outputs for some of these inputs. So in other words, each input does not have exactly one output. So this is not a function. In this section, we're really not just talking about functions, we're talking about one-to-one functions. So a function that is one-to-one means that each input has exactly one output and each output has exactly one input. They are one-to-one, one input for one output. So let's write that down. It is a function that has exactly one output for each input. I mean, that's a function. And exactly one input for each output. Okay, one input, one output, one output, one input. That's really why they called it one-to-one. So here, when we put in 0, we get 1. When we put in 1, we get -1. When we put in -1, we get -1. When we put in 2, we get 8. And when we put in -2, we get -8. Okay, now you might be thinking, what are these functions, right? This is probably y equals x cubed, right? So when you're cubing that negative number, you are getting a negative number there, but then if you cube 2, you get 8, but if you cube -2, you get -8. Okay, now notice that each input has exactly one output and vice versa, right? So this function is 1 to 1. Okay, let's look back at this. Now, obviously, if it's not a function, not 1 to 1. But this is a function, so we should look at whether it is 1 to 1 or not. And this function, notice that what's happening to my inputs is they're being squared. This is the function y equals x squared. Okay, now notice right here, when we get 3 and -3, we get the same output. So 9, the output, does not have one unique input. So this one is not 1-to-1. So it is a function, but it is not a 1-to-1 function. Let's look at functions and one-to-one functions graphically. So right here, we have the graph of y equals x squared, right? And as you know, we looked at this a little earlier. The vertical line test tells us that this is a function. So this is the vertical line test. Okay, so if we can draw a vertical line anywhere in the graph and only hit the graph one time, then we know that it is a function. Now, if we want to know if it's one-to-one, we also have to perform what's called the horizontal line test. So the horizontal line test works with the vertical line test, and this means that since it's crossing twice, then it is not one-to-one. So if it was one-to-one, it would only hit the graph, the horizontal line, one time as well. So on this other graph, this is the graph of y equals x cubed. So see, we can perform the vertical line test and the horizontal line test, and they will each only touch one time. So it passes the horizontal line test and the vertical line test, and that is why it is 1-to-1 function.